Hey there, my name's Jason Graves, and I'm a composer. Now, normally I would be filming and working from my recording studio, but as luck would have it, it's under complete and total construction at the moment. So like many other people in the world, I am coming at you from my glorified master bedroom. I recently wrote the music for the Deadlock Protocol, and I thought it would be a lot of fun to take a closer look at some of my favorite parts of those tracks. Now, when I first got into music, I actually started on the drums, so I'm really a drummer at heart. And I think when you're talking about action music, especially, the drums really have an important part to play. So here we have the Corpus faction combat track from the Deadlock Protocol update. And what you're seeing essentially is a representation of what you hear in the game when the music plays. So each one of these squares that you see is a different sound that's playing. And as I slowly scroll down, you get a sense of the overall picture of what the music sounds like. Blue is drums, for example. Purples and greens are synths. I think there are 92 tracks in this particular combat track, but what we're going to do is take a closer look at the drums. Now, traditionally speaking, the Corpus music has really been more on the tech electronic side of things, and drums and percussion is really no different. So you've got a mixture of what we call organic sounds, meaning drums you would hear in the real world, like a taiko drum or a snare drum, and then synthesized percussion, things that might be coming from a drum machine or maybe that I ran through a guitar amp or something like that. So it's really cool having this kind of hybrid approach because it sort of fits with the whole idea of the Deadlock Protocol, but also it helps cut through the mix and really gets an exciting, driving kind of feel to the drums. I'll admit that I am a drummer. That was actually the first instrument that I learned, so I really do love putting together drum parts. And a lot of times I think of them in three sections, sort of a low, medium, and high in terms of the pitches. So low would be something like this. Medium would be something like this. And then this would be high. So on their own, they sound pretty neat, but what's really great is when you start stacking them up. So that's the organic percussion. Then we also have some process percussion. Let's start with a low drum machine that I ran through a guitar amp. Nice and low and meaty. Now here's a nice mid sound that's just a regular sort of electronic drum loop that I put through a little tiny speaker that was distorted. And then some more drum machine sort of cymbal sounds. So they're all different, but they're all complementing each other. It's like a beautiful electronic drum sandwich. So really, we've got two completely different sets of flavors for the drums. And what's really magical is when you start putting them all together. That is how I composite and mix my drums. Now, I'm also a huge synthesizer geek, so any chance I have to use some of my keyboards, I go for it immediately. And I thought we'd take a quick look at a few of the keyboards I used for Deadlock Protocol. So I really focused on two specific synthesizers that I have, and the first one we're going to talk about is called a Nord. It's a beautiful looking keyboard, and it has a very, very distinct sound. And if any of you have played the game yet, or even watched some of the trailers, you'll probably recognize this theme. but it might sound a little different than you're used to hearing it. That's because this was the first version that I came up with, just using one of the synthesizer sounds from the Nord. And I realized that it was really missing something. In the mix, it just didn't have a lot of weight to it. So I grabbed another one and layered this with it. And that's a little more like the sound we're used to hearing. But it still didn't quite have the cut that I wanted. So I added some distortion, which is this box right here, and some delay, which is this, and now we have this. So now it's got that sort of aggressive, super in-your-face kind of idea. The problem is that by itself doesn't really do itself justice. But when you put the two of them together, now you've really got that final sound that you heard in the track. So what I thought would make an interesting contrast to that super aggressive kind of in-your-face lead synth sound is something a little more classic and less modern. And for that, I turned to my trusty JX8P Roland synthesizer. This was made in something like 1987, so it's been around for a while. But it has a very distinct classic kind of synth sound, and it's what I chose to use for the melody. And all I'm going to do here is just play you the melody as I played it live into the computer, and you'll know exactly what I mean. Now, what's beautiful about that is I literally did nothing to it. That's just coming straight off the keyboard. But that's the kind of sound that I needed. And a lot of times, the only way you can get that sound is to go back to that sort of classic analog gear. So that's just a super quick look into my world and how much fun I have working on this game. I can't thank George and everyone at Digital Extremes enough for letting me play in their sandbox. And thank you as well for playing and listening.